The crisp morning air, scented with damp earth and the promise of blossoms, clung to Jasper MacIntyre like a second skin. Upstate New York in early April was a palette of muted greens and browns, waiting for the artist's touch of spring. For Jas, though, the painting was already complete. He knew every contour of MacIntyre's acres, his family's legacy etched into the rolling hills like the lines on his grandfather's weathered hands. This was more than just a farm. It was an identity, a birthright, a sanctuary against the relentless churn of the outside world. Unsolved mystery, Jas often mused, wasn't some far-off detective novel. It was the intricate dance between sun and soil, the unpredictable yield of the apple crop, the secrets whispered by the ancient trees themselves. He knew they held stories far older than the clapboard farmhouse that stood sentinel on the highest rise. Stories of hardship, perseverance, and unwavering dedication. This year felt different, though. A deeper kind of anticipation stirred in his heart. He just hoped the thrilling story that would come wasn't tragic. His great-grandfather, a Scottish immigrant fleeing a journey of discovery gone wrong, had first broken ground here in the late 1890s. With calloused hands and a stubborn spirit, he'd transformed a patch of wilderness into a thriving orchard. Each generation had added its own layer to the MacIntyre story. New varieties of apples, innovations in cultivation, and most importantly, an unshakable commitment to the land. The farmhouse was a testament to this enduring legacy. Generations of MacIntyres had left their mark on the building, creating a uniquely crafted residence to which Jas felt at peace. There were cracks of history where they shouldn't be, as if time had just stopped on the building. Jas's day began as it always did, with a cup of strong black coffee on the porch. The aroma mingled with the earthy scent of the orchard, a comforting ritual that grounded him for the hours ahead. He surveyed his domain, his gaze sweeping over rows of gnarled apple trees, their branches reaching towards the sky like supplicating arms. He knew each tree intimately, its quirks, its strengths, its vulnerabilities. This was not a distant or mechanical process for him. A robin, perched on a nearby branch, chirped its cheerful greeting. "Morning, Red," Jas murmured, taking a sip of his coffee. "Another day to coax these beauties into giving us their best." The birds were more than just decoration to him. They were part of the ecosystem. The journey of discovery that morning wouldn't involve exotic locales or perilous adventures. His journey would be among the trees, nurturing his orchards, coaxing new life from old wood. His routine always centered on helping the orchard live its best life. As he approached the first row of trees, Jas paused, running a hand along the rough bark of an old Macintosh. This particular tree, nearly a century old, had always been a reliable producer. But this year, something seemed amiss. Its branches were heavy, laden with buds, yet there was a subtle lack of vibrancy, a muted quality to the leaves. "What's troubling you, old friend?" he whispered, his voice a low murmur that was lost in the rustle of the wind. He bent down, examining the soil around the base of the tree. It felt dry, almost lifeless. A pang of concern tightened his chest. He knew the importance of the soil, and the unsolved mystery of what made it so dry sat like a heavy stone within him. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the orchard, Jas moved from tree to tree, his brow furrowed with worry. He loved his work, the labor, and the land. He wasn't going to let that be changed. He would spend the entire day making things right. He wouldn't let anything stop him, not the weather, and certainly not anything else. He didn't know it yet, but someone else was about to come in. Harmony Ridge was a meticulously planned community, a testament to order and conformity. Rows of identical houses, each sporting a perfectly manicured lawn and a two-car garage, lined the street. It was a place where every shrub was pruned to precisely the same height, where the color palette was strictly enforced, and where the mere hint of nonconformity was swiftly quashed. Priscilla Albright thrived in this environment. Priscilla, freshly elected as the president of the Harmony Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, surveyed her domain with satisfaction. It was not a thrilling story, but she thought it will be a comfortable place where people respect one another. Harmony Ridge was her masterpiece, a testament to her unwavering belief in the power of rules and regulations. She dedicated years to perfecting its aesthetic, ensuring that every detail aligned with her vision of suburban perfection. A vision, she firmly believed, that directly translated into increased property values. Her election had been a landslide victory, fueled by her promises to maintain property values and enhance community standards. The previous HOA president, a kind but somewhat lax individual, had allowed a few minor infractions to slip through the cracks: a slightly overgrown hedge, a mismatched mailbox, a Halloween decoration left up a week too long. Priscilla saw these as signs of decay, a slippery slope that could lead to the utter collapse of Harmony Ridge's carefully constructed facade. Her first official act as president was to schedule a series of courtesy visits to properties that, in her estimation, fell short of the community's standards. And of course, top of her list was MacIntyre's Acres. The drive to the farm was a jarring transition. The pristine streets of Harmony Ridge gave way to a winding country road, the neatly trimmed lawns replaced by overgrown fields, and the identical houses traded for a weathered farmhouse. Priscilla wrinkled her nose. The scent of fertilizer and damp earth was a far cry from the artificial fragrance of the potpourri she favored. Pulling into the long gravel driveway of MacIntyre's Acres, Priscilla felt a surge of disdain. The farmhouse, while charming in a rustic sort of way, was clearly in need of repair. The orchard, with its gnarled, untamed trees, was a stark contrast to the meticulously landscaped gardens of Harmony Ridge. Jasper was tending to a row of apple trees when Priscilla's pristine white SUV pulled up. He straightened, wiping his brow with a dirt-stained handkerchief, and watched as a woman emerged from the vehicle. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored pantsuit, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her expression radiating an air of authority. "Mr. MacIntyre?" she asked, her voice crisp and businesslike. "That's me," Jasper replied, his tone cautious. "I'm Priscilla Albright, the newly elected president of the Harmony Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. I thought I'd pay you a visit." Priscilla stepped closer, her gaze sweeping over the farm with barely concealed disapproval. "I must say, Mr. MacIntyre, your property presents certain challenges to the aesthetic of our community." Jasper raised an eyebrow. "Challenges? Yes," Priscilla said, her tone tightening. "Tightening? Your farm, while undoubtedly charming in its own way, well, frankly, it's an eyesore. It detracts from the property values in Harmony Ridge." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "I'm here to discuss what steps you might be willing to take to bring your property into compliance with our community standards," Priscilla said, trying to make the unsolved mystery that Jasper would go along with her. This was the beginning. Priscilla wasn't someone who wanted conversation. She only wanted control. The first notice arrived a week later, crisp and official on Harmony Ridge Estate's letterhead. It was a friendly reminder, Priscilla Albright's signature emblazoned at the bottom, regarding the excessive height of the vegetation along the property line bordering Harmony Ridge. Translation: Jazz's wildflowers, a vibrant riot of color that attracted butterflies and bees, were deemed too unruly. Jazz stared at the letter, a knot of annoyance tightening in his stomach. He considered tossing it in the trash. He decided to file the letter with the others from that day. But still, this thrilling story had its elements. He'd always prided himself on being a good neighbor. But this was ridiculous. He wasn't even in their HOA. What they were doing wasn't neighborly at all. The second notice came a few days later. This one addressed the unauthorized parking of farm equipment visible from Harmony Ridge properties. The infraction? His vintage tractor, lovingly restored by his grandfather, parked near the barn. Jazz chuckled humorlessly. The tractor was a piece of MacIntyre history, a working artifact that he used regularly. "This journey of discovery will be hard," he muttered, shaking his head. The letters were clearly designed to harass him, to chip away at his resolve. He tried to dismiss them as the petty obsessions of an overzealous HOA president, but a seed of unease had been planted. Then came the complaints. Anonymous, of course. They arrived via email, addressed to the town council and carbon-copied to Jazz. The first complained about the offensive odors emanating from the farm. The second cited excessive noise levels from farm animals disturbing the peace. The third alleged unsafe traffic conditions caused by slow-moving farm vehicles. Jazz scoffed. "Offensive odors? That's the smell of honest work," he grumbled to Red, the robin who had become his faithful companion. "And as for unsafe traffic, I drive slower than a Sunday driver." But the complaints kept coming, each more absurd than the last. The town council, initially dismissive, started to take notice. A zoning inspector paid Jazz a visit, clipboard in hand, to investigate the offensive odors. A traffic officer issued a warning about slow-moving vehicles. He started to think that this was a setup. Jazz spent hours addressing the complaints, providing documentation, and explaining his farming practices. He was met with polite but skeptical faces. It was clear that Priscilla Albright's influence extended beyond the borders of Harmony Ridge. It was a clear-cut display of HOA greed and power. Unsolved mystery. How can one person have so much time on their hands? Jazz wondered aloud. He was being slowly buried under a mountain of bureaucratic paperwork. He spent less time in his orchard and more time inside his house. The constant interruptions and baseless accusations began to take their toll. The orchard, his sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield. His peaceful routine had been shattered, replaced by anxiety and frustration. One evening, after spending hours filling out forms and preparing for yet another town council meeting, Jazz slumped onto the porch, the setting sun casting long shadows across the orchard. He looked out at the trees, his gnarled roots reaching deep into the earth. They had weathered countless storms, droughts, and pests. But this was a different kind of threat, a relentless, insidious attack that was slowly suffocating his way of life. He picked up one of the fallen apples at his feet, but he thought of Priscilla Albright. That's it, he realized. She will not take away MacIntyre's acres. He said it out loud. This small bit of action made him ready. He felt he was prepared for his journey of discovery now. Drowning in paperwork and simmering with resentment, Jasper needed a distraction. He wandered into the town library, a quaint brick building that had stood on Main Street since the early 1900s. The scent of aged paper and leather-bound books enveloped him like a comforting embrace. It was a place where stories lived and history whispered secrets to those who listened. He gravitated towards the local history section, hoping to find something, anything that could shed light on the origins of Harmony Ridge and its seemingly insatiable desire for control. He needed something on his journey of discovery. He felt like he needed a guide or a manual, or at least someone who could tell him how to deal with the madness. That's where he met Finnegan O'Malley, the town's self-proclaimed historian and resident eccentric. Finnegan, a wiry old man with twinkling blue eyes and a shock of white hair that defied gravity, was hunched over a pile of old maps and documents. "Looking for something, young fella?" Finnegan asked, his voice raspy but kind. "Just trying to understand this whole Harmony Ridge thing," Jazz replied, gesturing towards a stack of pamphlets on community standards and property value enhancement. Finnegan chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Harmony Ridge, eh? That's a name with a history, lad. Not all of it harmonious, mind you." He leaned closer, his eyes gleaming with a mischievous glint. "Ever hear of the Great Hedge War of '78? Jazz shook his head, intrigued. Finnegan launched into a tale of suburban warfare, recounting how the then HOA president had declared war on hedges that were aesthetically displeasing. The ensuing conflict, he explained, had divided the community and resulted in countless fines and legal battles. The unsolved mystery that they thought something could get solved with fighting, Finnegan said with a dismissive wave. It was madness, pure and simple. As Finnegan spoke, Jazz noticed a woman browsing the shelves nearby. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a weary expression. She caught his gaze and offered a small, knowing smile. "Bethany Croft," she introduced herself, extending her hand. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with Finnegan. He's quite the storyteller." "Jas MacIntyre," he replied, shaking her hand. "And you know about the Great Hedge War?" "And you know about the Great Hedge War?" Bethany sighed. "I lived through it," she said. "I was on the HOA board back then. It was a learning experience." She explained that she had become disillusioned with the HOA's increasingly rigid rules and its focus on superficial appearance. She had eventually resigned, unable to reconcile her conscience with the organization's actions. Priscilla Albright is just the latest in a long line of power-hungry HOA presidents, Bethany said, her voice laced with frustration. "They come and go, but the underlying problem remains. The desire to control and the fear of anything that deviates from the norm. Journey of discovery will be a tough one. You need good company," Finnegan said. "Bethany knows the battlefield and I know the history. We'll help you fight this, lad." Bethany nodded in agreement. "Priscilla may have the power of the HOA behind her, But you have something more important, the support of the community. As Jas left the library that afternoon, a sense of hope flickered in his heart. He was no longer alone in this fight. He had found allies, people who understood the challenges he faced, and who were willing to stand by his side. The battle wouldn't be easy, but with Finnegan's knowledge and Bethany's experience, he felt a renewed sense of determination. The whispers of rebellion had begun. The idea sparked in Jas's mind like a lightning bolt. He was tired of being on the defensive, constantly reacting to Priscilla Albright's petty attacks. He needed to take control of the narrative, to show Harmony Ridge and the wider community what MacIntyre's Acres was truly about. Apple Fest, he announced to Bethany and Finnegan over coffee at the local diner. A celebration of apples, community, and everything that makes this farm special. Bethany grinned. "I love it," a direct challenge to Priscilla's authority. Finnegan nodded approvingly. "A brilliant stroke, lad. Show them the value of your land, the importance of tradition. Make them see what they stand to lose." Jas spent the next few weeks working tirelessly to bring his vision to life. He enlisted the help of local musicians, set up booths for craft vendors, and organized hayrides through the orchard. He baked apple pies, brewed apple cider, and prepared bushels of crisp, juicy apples for sale. The unsolved mystery that everything would work out remained in the balance. But at least he knew it was worth a try. The challenge of being challenged made everything better. He put up flyers all over town, advertising the event as a celebration of community and local harvests. He made sure to emphasize the historical significance of MacIntyre's Acres, highlighting its role in the town's agricultural heritage. The thrilling story would be known to all by word of mouth. Word spread quickly. The local newspaper ran a feature on MacIntyre's Acres and the upcoming Apple Fest, portraying Jas as a hard-working farmer fighting to preserve his family's legacy against the relentless pressure of suburban development. It was a compelling narrative, and people responded enthusiastically. It was the journey of discovery that would let others see what they had. Priscilla Albright, of course, was not pleased. She saw Apple Fest as a blatant act of defiance, a deliberate attempt to undermine her authority and disrupt the carefully curated image of Harmony Ridge. She sent Jas a strongly worded letter, citing noise violations, traffic congestion, and unauthorized commercial activity. She threatened to shut down the event if he didn't comply with her demands. Jas ignored her. He knew that Priscilla's threats were empty. He had obtained all the necessary permits and licenses. He was operating within the law. The day of Apple Fest dawned bright and clear. A crisp autumn breeze rustled through the leaves of the apple trees, carrying the scent of ripe fruit and wood smoke. As the morning progressed, cars began to arrive, filling the makeshift parking lot that Jas had set up in a nearby field. Families streamed into the orchard, their faces alight with excitement. Children ran through the rows of apple trees, their laughter echoing through the air. Couples strolled hand in hand, enjoying the festive atmosphere. Local musicians played upbeat bluegrass music, filling the air with joyful sounds. The craft vendors did a brisk business, selling handmade jewelry, pottery, and other local crafts. The hayrides were a hit, taking visitors on a scenic tour of the orchard. The aroma of apple pies filled the air, drawing people to the food stalls where Jas and his helpers were serving up slices of warm, delicious pie. Jas stood near the entrance, greeting visitors with a warm smile and a hearty handshake. He watched as people explored his farm, marveling at the beauty of the apple trees and enjoying the festive atmosphere. He felt a surge of pride and satisfaction. He had created something special, something that celebrated community, tradition, and the simple joys of life. As the day wore on, Jas noticed a familiar figure approaching. Priscilla Albright, her face tight with disapproval, marched towards him, her high heels sinking into the soft earth. "Mr. MacIntyre," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "this is a flagrant violation of community standards. This carnival is disrupting the peace and tranquility of Harmony Ridge." Jas smiled calmly. "Priscilla, I invited everyone to come. This has been a well-organized and planned activity." He gestured towards the crowd of happy faces. "This is what community looks like, Priscilla. People coming together to celebrate local traditions and support a local farm. I think your HOA's focus is on profits. The town is more than that." As he said that, the crowd cheered him on. Priscilla didn't know what to do. Everyone was watching, As she said that, it was only silence. She spun around, stormed off, her face as red as a ripe apple. It was clear that the first battle had been won, and it would be a journey of discovery to see whose influence was stronger. Apple Fest was a resounding success, a victory not just for jazz, but for the spirit of community that Priscilla Albright had tried to suppress. However, it also served as a catalyst, pushing Priscilla further down a path of desperation and increasingly questionable tactics. The unsolved mystery now was how far would she go? The first sign of escalation came in the form of construction crews. A week after Applefest, Jazz awoke to the sound of heavy machinery rumbling near the boundary line between MacIntyre's Acres and Harmony Ridge. He grabbed his coffee and headed out to investigate. What he found sent a chill down his spine. Construction workers were erecting a massive chain-link fence, not on Harmony Ridge property, but on his. The fence, far from being an aesthetic improvement, was an imposing barrier, designed to block the view of the farm from the surrounding houses. Jazz approached the foreman, his voice tight with anger. "What's going on here? Who authorized this?" The foreman, a burly man with a weary expression, shrugged. "Got a permit from Harmony Ridge Estates, says it's a community enhancement project." Jazz knew that Priscilla was behind this. He hadn't received any notice, any permit, anything. It was illegal and she was willing to do it. He immediately called Sheriff Brody, the local lawman. Brody, a man of quiet integrity, arrived on the scene within minutes. After examining the documentation, which proved to be falsified, he ordered the construction to cease immediately. "Mrs. Albright is going to hear from me about this," Brody said, his jaw tight. "This is not how we do things. The journey of discovery she's looking for will go on the county record." The next attack was more insidious. Rumors began to circulate throughout the town, whispers of unsafe practices at MacIntyre's Acres, contaminated apples, and animal cruelty. These accusations, completely baseless, were clearly designed to damage Jazz's reputation and scare away customers. Bethany, still connected to some residents of Harmony Ridge, discovered that Priscilla had been actively spreading these lies, using the HOA's email list to disseminate her propaganda. "She has no shame," Bethany told Jazz, her voice filled with disgust. "She's willing to say anything, do anything. To destroy you." The rumors began to affect Jazz's business. Customers canceled orders and the Apple Fest, once so vibrant, saw a noticeable decline in attendance. He struggled to maintain his composure, but the weight of the accusations was crushing him. Sheriff Brody, growing increasingly concerned about Priscilla's actions, paid her a visit. He found her in her immaculately decorated living room, surrounded by HOA documents and planning material. "Priscilla," Brody said, his voice firm but respectful, "I need you to stop this. The fence was illegal, the rumors are unsubstantiated, and you're creating a hostile environment in this town." Priscilla looked at Brody, her eyes cold. "I'm simply trying to protect the property values of Harmony Ridge and ensure the safety and well-being of our residents." "I think," Brody said, his gaze unwavering, "you're abusing your power and hurting an innocent man. I'm going to ask you one more time. Stop this now. I don't want to find myself having to take further action." As Brody left Priscilla's house, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. He just hopes he's ready for what this thrilling story has in store. The chilling effect of Priscilla's rumors was undeniable. Jasper's sales dwindled. Many Harmony Ridge residents, swayed by the whispers of contaminated apples and unsafe farm practices, avoided MacIntyre's Acres altogether. Despair threatened to engulf him, but the support of Finnegan and Bethany kept his hope alive. "This unsolved mystery isn't about apples, lad," Finnegan said one evening, his eyes twinkling mischievously. "It's about power, control, and a very long history of HOA overreach." He revealed that he'd been digging through the town archives, unearthing documents that detailed the many battles waged between Harmony Ridge Estates and its neighbors over the years. He found old newspaper clippings about zoning disputes, letters of complaint about noise and property lines, and even court records of lawsuits filed against the HOA for harassment and intimidation. "The thrilling story of what people have to go through to save their lives makes these papers more important," Finnegan said to Bethan, looking at an old piece of paper. He handed Bethany a thick folder filled with copies of these historical documents. "Bethany's got a more personal connection to all this." Bethany, her face etched with a mix of anger and determination, explained that she'd spent years trying to reform the HOA from within, to moderate its policies and promote a more community-minded approach. But her efforts had been repeatedly thwarted by a small but powerful group of residents who were obsessed with maintaining control and enforcing their narrow vision of suburban perfection. "Priscilla is just the latest iteration of this problem," Bethany said, her voice filled with frustration. "She's learned from the mistakes of her predecessors, becoming even more ruthless and manipulative." As Bethany and Finnegan laid out the history of Harmony Ridge Estates, Jasper began to grasp the true scope of the challenge he faced. Priscilla wasn't just a neighbor with a personal vendetta. She was a symptom of a deep-seated problem, a culture of control that had been festering for decades. He was going on a journey of discovery he couldn't come back from. He spent hours poring over the documents, his mind racing as he pieced together the puzzle of Harmony Ridge's past. He discovered that the HOA had a long history of targeting individuals who dared to challenge its authority, using legal tactics, intimidation, and even outright lies to silence dissent. "They almost always win," Bethany said, her voice tinged with sadness. "People get tired of fighting, they move away, they give in." "Well, I'm not moving away," Jas said, his jaw tight with determination. "And I'm not giving in." He realized he needed more than just the support of Finnegan and Bethany. He needed to expose Priscilla's corruption and the HOA's history of abuse to the entire community. He needed to show them that they weren't powerless, that they had the right to challenge authority and fight for what was right. Bethany suggested contacting a local journalist, someone who had a reputation for investigating corruption and holding those in power accountable. She gave him the name of a reporter at the town newspaper, someone she thought might be interested in the story. That night, unable to sleep, Jasper walked through his orchard, the moonlight casting long shadows among the apple trees. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a burning desire to protect his family's legacy and to fight for the freedom of his community. The ghosts of the past had awakened, but they had also provided him with the knowledge and the inspiration to fight for a better future. The battle had only just begun, he knew, but now, armed with the truth, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. He felt like he had all the weapons needed for his journey of discovery. The Harmony Ridge Estates Homeowners Association meeting was typically a sparsely attended affair, a formality that most residents ignored. However, this night was different. The community center was packed, the air thick with anticipation and a palpable sense of unease. Word had spread about Jasper MacIntyre's accusations against Priscilla Albright, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. Priscilla, seated at the head of the table, surveyed the crowd with a forced smile. She had expected a larger turnout, but she was confident that she could control the narrative, dismiss the allegations as the rantings of a disgruntled farmer, and maintain her grip on power. She was wrong. As the meeting commenced, Priscilla briskly reviewed the agenda, attempting to project an air of normalcy. But the tension in the room was undeniable. Whispers rippled through the crowd, and eyes darted nervously towards Jas, who sat quietly near the back, flanked by Bethany and Finnegan. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, one resident stood up and addressed Priscilla directly. "Mrs. Albright, before we move on, I think we need to address the allegations Mr. MacIntyre has made against you." Priscilla sighed dramatically. "I was hoping to avoid this, but since it's been brought up, these are completely unfounded and frankly slanderous. Mr. MacIntyre is upset because he refuses to comply with community standards. It's not that complicated. The goal is to avoid the journey of discovery and just comply." Jas rose to his feet, his voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, Mrs. Albright, this isn't about community standards. It's about your abuse of power, your attempts to destroy my livelihood, and your disregard for the history and traditions of this town. And I have evidence to prove it." He gestured to Bethany, who stepped forward and distributed copies of the historical documents Finnegan had unearthed. Gasps rippled through the crowd as residents read about the HOA's past transgressions, the zoning disputes, the lawsuits, and the allegations of harassment and intimidation. "These documents," Jas continued, "show a pattern of behavior, a long history of Harmony Ridge Estates targeting individuals who dare to challenge its authority. And Priscilla Albright is simply the latest in a long line of HOA presidents who have abused their power to silence dissent." He then presented his own evidence, copies of Priscilla's threatening letters, photos of the illegal fence construction, and sworn affidavits from customers who had been subjected to her smear campaign. He laid out the facts, clearly and concisely, building a damning case against Priscilla. Finnegan stepped forward, his voice raspy but powerful. "This land," he said, gesturing towards the window, "was settled by hard-working farmers who valued independence and community. Harmony Ridge was formed later. You shouldn't take power over what was already here." As Finnegan spoke, Jasper watched Priscilla's face. Her carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. Her forced smile had vanished, replaced by a look of cold fury. She was losing control of the situation, and she knew it. The meeting grew increasingly chaotic, the tension rising to a fever pitch. Residents shouted accusations and counter-accusations. Some defended Priscilla, clinging to the belief that she was simply trying to protect their property values. Others expressed outrage at her actions, demanding accountability. Finally, Bethany stepped forward. "We have a choice to make tonight," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "We can continue to allow a small group of people to control our lives and dictate how we live. Or we can stand up for what's right, reclaim our community, and build a future based on respect, cooperation, and individual freedom." Her words resonated with the crowd. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. People looked at each other, their faces filled with a newfound sense of hope. A motion was made to hold a vote of no confidence in Priscilla Albright's leadership. After a heated debate, the vote was called. The results were decisive. The crowd started yelling as a thrilling story is unfolding right before their eyes. She was voted out. Priscilla Albright sat in stunned silence, her world collapsing around her. She looked at the faces of her neighbors, the people she had once controlled, and saw only disappointment and anger. The power she had wielded for so long had vanished, leaving her isolated and alone. The days following the HOA meeting were a blur of chaos and change in Harmony Ridge. The atmosphere was electric, a stark contrast to the stifling conformity that had defined the community for so long. Residents openly discussed the events of the meeting, sharing stories of Priscilla Albright's past abuses of power and expressing their relief at her departure. For Priscilla, the aftermath was nothing short of devastating. Stripped of her position and her carefully cultivated image, she found herself ostracized and alone. Neighbors who had once showered her with praise and admiration now avoided her gaze, whispering behind her back. The journey of discovery that she embarked on made her into a terrible person. Her carefully constructed world, built on order and control, had crumbled around her. The meticulous landscaping she had obsessed over now seemed meaningless. Her spotless house felt like a prison, trapping her in a reality she could no longer control. The unsolved mystery that would be most prominent for her to dwell on would be what went wrong. She tried to salvage what she could. She sent out emails defending her actions, claiming that she had only been trying to protect the community's best interests. She even attempted to rally her former supporters, but few responded. The tide had turned, and her influence was gone. The HOA quickly moved to undo Priscilla's legacy. They repealed many of her most restrictive rules, allowing residents to express their individuality and embrace a more relaxed approach to community living. The fence that had been erected along the property line with MacIntyre's acres was torn down, symbolizing the end of an era of conflict and division. One afternoon, Jazz saw a moving truck parked in front of Priscilla's house. He watched as workers loaded boxes and furniture, dismantling her life in Harmony Ridge. He felt a pang of sympathy, but it was fleeting. Priscilla had brought this upon herself, her obsession with control ultimately leading to her own downfall. It was a thrilling story of karma making its way. As the truck pulled away, Priscilla emerged from the house, her face pale and drawn. She glanced at Jazz, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and defeat. Then, without a word, she climbed into her car and drove away, leaving Harmony Ridge and its troubled past behind. All she could look forward to was a new journey of discovery. With Priscilla gone, a sense of liberation swept through Harmony Ridge. The community, once defined by rigid conformity, began to embrace individuality and cooperation. The HOA, now under new leadership, adopted a more flexible approach, prioritizing communication and community engagement over strict enforcement of rules. The unsolved mystery of whether the town could ever find peace was answered. The change was palpable. Residents started decorating their houses with personal touches, planting gardens that reflected their unique tastes, and organizing community events that celebrated diversity. The atmosphere was lighter, more relaxed, and genuinely welcoming. MacIntyre's acres thrived. The Apple Fest became an annual tradition, drawing crowds from all over the region. Jas expanded his farm, adding new varieties of apples and other local produce. He even started offering workshops on sustainable farming practices, sharing his knowledge and passion with others. The thrilling story of his journey from embattled farmer to community leader was an inspiration to many. He had shown that it was possible to stand up to authority, to fight for what was right, and to build a better future, one apple at a time. But perhaps the most significant change was the budding relationship between Jas and Bethany. They found common ground in their shared commitment to community and their appreciation for the simple joys of life. They spent hours walking through the orchard, talking, laughing, and sharing their dreams for the future. Bethany became an active partner in the farm, helping Jas with the Apple Fest, assisting with the workshops, and offering her expertise in community organizing. She brought a new energy and perspective to MacIntyre's acres, complementing Jas's grounded nature and his deep connection to the land. One evening, as the sun set over the orchard, casting a golden glow on the apple trees, Jas and Bethany sat on the porch, sipping apple cider. The air was filled with the scent of blossoms and the sound of crickets chirping. "This is perfect," Bethany said, her voice soft. Jas smiled, taking her hand in his. "It is," he replied. "We made it through. I'm sure we'll still have our challenges ahead, but now we'll work through those together." He looked out at the orchard, his heart filled with gratitude. He had faced a formidable adversary, but he had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. He had preserved his family's legacy, protected his community, and found love along the way. Harmony Ridge was no longer a place of rigid conformity and fear. It had become a place of hope, community, and the celebration of individuality. The journey of discovery had been long and arduous, but it had led to a destination far more beautiful and fulfilling than anyone could have imagined. There was no more unsolvable mystery to dread because the people finally realized that their community required cooperation. The tale of Jasper and Priscilla offers powerful lessons for navigating modern life. First, protect your values and heritage. Jasper's unwavering commitment to his farm reminds us to defend what's truly important, even when facing external pressures. Second, community matters. Seek and nurture supportive relationships. Jas's alliance with Bethany and Finnegan highlights the strength found in shared purpose. Third, don't underestimate the power of speaking up. Jas transitioned from passive target to active advocate. Don't underestimate the power of getting your voice heard. Fourth, power corrupts. Acknowledge your flaws and strive to be better. Priscilla's obsession reminds us that unchecked ambition can lead to downfall. Reflect on your actions and strive to be the best version of yourself. You can learn from this thrilling story of life. In the end, remember that resilience, community, and remaining true to yourself create a fulfilling and lasting journey.